Good evening from Swansea, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for professional wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. It's Saturday, which means Friday night WWE SmackDown was last night on Fox. And it was a solid show, I thought. But it was one which it lacked star power. There was no Roman Reigns. There was no John Cena. But we're going to get into it today. We're going to get into the weeds with it. And we're going to, say what we liked, what we didn't like, what we hated, what we loved. And we're going to dig in deep and review the show for you guys. But firstly, let me introduce the panel for today's episode. Firstly, the co-host of the show, Clark Taylor. How are things, Clark?
I'm doing well. What's going on, Ben? And I'm stoked to be here, stoked to talk about SmackDown. It's a little odd. After the last 2 weekends, we had so much wrestling content at our fingertips every single night, whether it be a pay-per-view or not, all kinds of stuff. Yes, we have Collision tonight, and we had SmackDown last night, but it does feel like one of those more normal weeks by comparison. I'm still excited to get into it though and chat it up.
It really, really does. I mean, I understand that a lot. I mean, of course, yesterday we did the traditional weekend preview show, which, I mean, if you go back a couple of months, that was just the SmackDown preview show. Then it became the SmackDown and AEW Collision preview show. And for the last couple of weeks, it's been a pay-per-view prediction show. But now we're back on schedule. No consecutive pay-per-views, at least in the professional wrestling world. Of course, in UFC, we have one tonight. But yeah, it feels like it's a bit more of a normal week. We've got Bobby Batito in the comments. Shout out to you, Bobby. We hope you're doing great. But also joining us today, we have the head of opinions, the Impact sub here at Wrestling Republic, the man who subbed in today because I messed up with the schedule. I'll hold my hands up for that one. But we got Anthony Ricciardi joining us. How are you, Anthony?
Doing all right. I wasn't prepared to really review SmackDown as I watched Impact's Victory Road last night and watched SmackDown this morning before the show. So should be fun.
Absolutely, and thank you for stepping in. You really did save us here today. But let's just get right into things, and let's talk about what opened Friday Night SmackDown, because of course that was a match in the women's division where the the WWE Women's Undisputed Champion. They've got so many names to these titles now. It's a little confusing. But the WWE Women's Champion, Io Sky, and Bayley teamed up, otherwise known as Damage Control, to take on Shotzi Blackheart and Charlotte Flair. And Dakota Kai was at ringside for the show, and yes, she's injured at the minute, but the fact that she was ringside for the match, it makes things just a little bit more interesting, and I do like that. But in the end, it ended up costing Bayley and Io Sky the match as Asuka choked out Dakota Kai, distracting Io Sky, and then leading to Shotzi pinning Bayley. And I'll say this, right? I'm really, really happy Shotzi Blackheart is getting a push. I've watched her for years now. She's gotten a lot of criticism over the last couple of years. Some people have been saying stuff about, her botches and stuff, but that happens in wrestling. I've watched her for a number of years, and she had a couple of poor months once she got called up to the main roster. But in general, I really do actually think she's almost underrated at times. So I'm glad she's getting a push. But at the same time, Bayley's never felt so unimportant as she has right now. She feels like she's almost third, she almost feels like she's the least important member of Damage Control. To me, as a Bayley fan, I'm not too happy about it. But of course, Clark, you're also a Bayley fan. Give me your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, you said it right there, and I've been critical of Damage Control since the outset. When Bailey was the clear and defined leader, now it doesn't feel like that at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't want to go all conspiracy theorist here, but she being punished for Sasha Banks or something? What are we doing? This is Bailey. All the work she put in over the pandemic era. I mean, 2 characters she's gotten over to the moon. What in the world is going on? Someone explain. I don't get it. Because I love Io Sky. I really, really, really like Dakota Kai too. But what are we doing with Bailey? And what damage has been controlled? If anything, all we've damaged is Bailey. And why would you damage the most talented one in the entire group? What are we doing? Io Sky's title reign overshadowed by Bailey being in the shadows. It makes no sense whatsoever in my eyes. And I cannot figure it out for the life of me. Charlotte Flair always looks great. Shotzi looked pretty good. Outside of that, not at all my favorite segment of the night, or even close.
Fair enough. I mean, that's probably the least surprising answer you'll give today, Clark, because of course, you've been critical of Damage Control at times, but Bobby agrees with me in saying that he likes Shotzi Blackheart too. But Anthony, give me your thought on the opening segment of WWE SmackDown.
I gotta be honest, the first time I went to watch this is before I knew I was on the show. I was like, oh, I could skip this on the DVR because I'm not reviewing it. And then, of course, you called me, and then I went, oh, I have to go back and watch this now. To be perfectly honest, I still really had no interest in this, in the sense that I don't like Charlotte as a face. I think in a lot of ways she's like her father. They're better at heels. I find it hard to believe Charlotte's caring about Shotzi. Like, knowing her history on screen as a heel, that kind of took me a little bit out of it. I didn't like the finish. I understand Asuka's a distraction, but she has Io's title, and Io's going to yell at her from the apron and not go after her and try to get her belt back. I don't know if that was a timing thing where it was supposed to be instantaneous, where she's on the apron yelling, and that's when Charlotte takes her out. But she was there for like a few seconds at least, yelling at her to give Charlotte time to knock her off. So I didn't like the finish of it. I think, like Clark has mentioned multiple times, and I have too, I agree with him. We still never got an answer why Damage Control's even together in the first place. And it's I don't know if they're trying to be like an NWO type group, which was, hopefully what I think AEW is trying to do with the Outcast. And maybe Damage Control is going to be more towards that now that they have a belt that they can actually do stuff with. I'm curious to see where they go with it. I'm assuming it's eventually going to lead to a Bailey-Io matchup because they've teased it too much, I would assume. But that'd be my guess.
I mean, yeah, I do actually agree with you about Charlotte being, babyface. She just is more of a natural heel, and it all comes back to what damage is Damage Control controlling, because it just doesn't make any sense, right? I didn't have as much of an issue with their formation as Clark had. But I would have liked a bit more of a backstory to it. That would have made a lot more sense. Would have, explained to the casual viewer a lot better. As hardcore fans, it made sense to us. To casual fans, it probably didn't make as much sense. And maybe that's why they've struggled getting over so much as well. I will say this. I think it has done Io Sky good. I really, really do. I think it certainly helped too. I don't think she'd be missed Money in the Bank if it wasn't for Damage Control. But Bailey's probably like the weakest we've seen her on the main roster. I don't know. I mean, Clark, would you agree with that, really?
Oh, yeah, it's brutal. And it seems unfair. That's why I even presented the Sasha Banks thing. Like, it's so illogical. I can't put my finger on any other reason besides that.
Yeah.
And that I think is the most frustrating part. It's the
really
only thing that makes sense.
I will agree with you there. But now let's move on to something which I personally think makes a lot of sense. And that was LA Knight, yeah, facing Austin Theory on last night's episode of SmackDown, where LA Knight got the win. But I just said a second ago that I thought that this match made a lot of sense. Well, it's not just this match. I think this entire feud makes a lot of sense, and I will tell you why. I think that this is leading to Grayson Waller teaming up with Austin Theory to take on LA Knight and John Cena. And I love the idea of that. Some people will say, that's not a big enough of a match for John Cena to come back for. But here's the thing about that, right? In that match, John Cena would be giving his rub to LA Knight, Austin Theory, and Grayson Waller. Grayson and Austin are two of WWE's brightest younger stars, and LA Knight is, well, arguably the most over star in the company right now, outside of maybe Cody Rhodes. So I'm all good for this. I'm really happy to see John Cena, helping these guys out, and hopefully when he comes to SmackDown next week, I'm right about this. Hopefully that is the direction they go in, because that for me, I would love. Tag team match, LA Knight, John Cena versus Grayson Waller and Austin Theory. That's a bit of me. But Anthony, I'll pass this one to you first. Would you like to see that?
I think a tag match would help hide any weaknesses Cena has. I mean, we saw firsthand live in person at WrestleMania. Cena, I don't know if it's because it was a younger talent in Austin Theory. That was not a good showing for Cena. So I don't know if he needs to be in there with a fellow veteran that could smoke and mirror it, or a tag match would hide it. I mean, they could do that if that's the direction they're going to go. I really would prefer LA Knight, kind of them focusing on a singles push for him. I'd rather see an LA Knight against Cena, really, to be perfectly honest. I think Cena probably has the best shot of the four, Waller close behind, of being propelled and being able to do something. They've tried Theory multiple times. I've liked Theory from Evolve, but they've tried so many times to get this guy over, and it's just not working. So I don't, he's almost a dead end at this point, unless something dramatic happens, unless he does a face turn and is able to get over. But the heel stuff, it's not working. When you compare him to somebody like MJF, who's around the same age bracket, or even Waller, they're significantly better than he is for an entertainment value and interest. To me, that's the direction I would go with it.
I mean, that does. I mean, that would make a lot of sense. Like you said, a tag match really does protect John Cena. He's not a full-time wrestler anymore. He's getting on a bit. And I mean, yes, there were comparisons, of other wrestlers around his age who've come back and had full-time runs. But they kind of focus full-time, put in their work into it, right? Even if it is just for a few matches, they're training every day. John Cena doesn't always have the time to train every day. Now that there's an actor strike, yeah, sure, maybe. Oh, yeah. But WrestleMania, like you said. Well, writer strike, sorry.
The one other thing you have to think about, and it's whether it was with The Rock or Cena, when you're doing Hollywood stuff, granted, I know there's a strike going on, but you sign contracts. A lot of these studios are not that excited about you getting in a wrestling ring. Yeah. They may be more willing. All right, you're limited in a tag match. They might be more willing, but that's a factor you have to consider too. There's insurances and stuff like that is outside the wrestling bubble.
Yeah, no, I mean, great point. I mean, Clark, give me your thoughts on this. The LA Knight versus Austin Theory match on SmackDown and where it could possibly lead.
So for me, I really like this. I think this is kind of a litmus test for LA Knight. It was like, look, you've got Austin Theory, the United States champion who had his run, was young. He had something similar, the last few years where he got pushed with Cena and whatnot. I think this is finally we're going to get to see. They're going to test LA Knight and decide whether or not he's really that over now. And last night was the start. So he goes over Theory in that match. Now you add the Cena rub. He's probably going to have to take a beating to be as big of a babyface as he is to set up for this. He's the megastar. He brings in another megastar. as his partner, he's going to have to take a beating. And I think that's the one thing we haven't truly seen him do outside of the Pitch Black match, which was marred with controversy at points. Right? And we haven't seen him do it. So whether it be Waller and Theory, an attack from behind backstage or whatever, his selling is going to be put to the test. And once we see that, I have no problem with the tag match. I think there's a combination of what both of you guys said in our future. I think we see the tag match, and I think we see one more out of Cena versus LA Knight after the fact. And everybody gets the rub, and I think that's the direction I would go. LA Knight just needs to pass these little tests. He did last night. Whatever comes next to set up for this tag match, if that's the direction we go, he's got to pass that test too. Because I think that's the one thing as a babyface, LA Knight has not yet to fully prove, is can he sell and take a really bad beating?
Yeah. No,
You
I mean that's a good point. You mentioned the Pitch Black match. Then again, I'm thinking back to NXT. He did a few times in NXT. I mean, against Cameron Grimes, I thought he sold really, really well.
I agree.
And
I just
of
think
course,
on the
Bray
main
Wyatt
roster
too.
is kind of, I guess to qualify that one, I would say more on the main roster prove that.
Yeah.
I know Eli Drake could sell too, right? Not
Yeah.
just LA Knight. I'm aware of that, right? But for this main roster push to prove it on television in front of the new endeavor, in front of everybody, right? Hey, I am this good. I can do this. That's kind of, I think, what needs to happen next.
Yeah, and of course, we haven't really spoken about it on the show yet. Of course, if you guys follow us on Instagram, which you definitely should do, or even Twitter, which you should also definitely do, or now known as X. We spoke about this the other day, but the Endeavor deal purchasing WWE and merging it with UFC as a new company, TKO Group Holdings, will be finalized this Tuesday. So that's going to be an interesting one for sure. We're going to be talking about that probably in detail next week. But you do bring up a good point, Clark, where yes, they're saying the product won't change, but at the end of the day, Vince McMahon, Nick Khan is answering to Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon is answering to Ari Emanuel now. So you kind of need to impress yet another layer, not just Triple H, Nick Khan, and Vince, but now also Ari Emanuel on top of that. So that's an interesting point.
There is one thing they could do, taking the Cena thing out of it, and it could actually help because they really haven't used him. Cameron Grimes, he's not injured, correct? Is he injured?
No, he's not. He's completely fine as far as I know.
So I think what you could do is do Theory and Waller against LA Knight, and LA Knight has to choose has to find a partner. They have history together. I know they were rivals, but now they're both baby faces. That LA Knight's over. He could give Cameron the rub by being in this match.
He could, but I think that the only issue with that is it stalls LA Knight. I think the rub of LA Knight being the megastar, because that's what they're pushing him as now, right? Mm-hmm. In the way they did the aesthetic with Miz and everything. I mean, it was even hinted at with the Theory slight build that they had and what the story they told in the match. I think if it's a tag situation, he's got to bring in a real megastar to get that rub.
I agree with you, but if Cena's not available or for whatever reason they don't want to do that.
I thought he signed for like 7-8 weeks or whatever, isn't that?
He is, yeah.
Appearing and wrestling in matches are two different things.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. It's very
true.
I
mean, those are some great points. I mean, Cameron Grimes, since he's been called up to Friday Night SmackDown, he has done next to nothing. I went on a rant about it a few weeks ago. I won't get back into it now. I'm not in that mood today. I'm not in the ranting mood today. But yes, it's disappointing he hasn't done too much. If this is a way to get him involved in the product, I won't mind that. But the idea of John Cena being involved with these three talents who aren't very well known yet, I think that could be a great thing.
I will add on the Grimes situation too, as you mentioned. Sorry, that's why I was kind of like, I got excited. I'm like, yesterday I was thinking about, we discussed the trade from Raw to SmackDown.
Yeah.
And when we did, I didn't say it on air, but I almost did. I'm like, whoever it is should be for Cameron Grimes. Send him to Raw, where there's maybe put him in an Intercontinental title
Nice
thing,
for Jey
put
Uso.
him somewhere else. No, I know now. We know, right? I'm talking about at the time.
Yeah.
That was like just my thought was send Cameron Grimes over to Raw from SmackDown, and because I think there's just more opportunity there for him right now.
Well, I mean, when you have a 3-hour show versus a 2-hour show, there's always going to be more opportunities for younger stars like a Cameron Grimes. That's why I always usually think that any new star getting called up to Raw has, more of a chance. Now, JD McDonough wasn't used for like 4 months. Odyssey Jones still hasn't been used. So, I mean, that logic,
I don't think there's anything there, to be honest.
Odyssey
Whether
got
they used them or not.
smacked at the Superstar Spectacle. I actually weirdly saw the highlight of the finish by Braun Breaker. Not to give that away, but
oh gosh. But I mean, Braun Breaker could be a call up soon. But anyway, let's not get into that right now. Let's get into the Judgment Days, a faction which I like. Clark, I know you have mixed feelings about, but they faced a tag team who I love. You guys know me. I'm a huge Butch guy. I'm a huge Pete Dunne guy. Going way back now. Butch and Ridge Holland teamed up to take on Finn Balor and Damon Priest of the Judgment Day, the tag team champions. Obviously, Butch and Holland lost. But before we get into what happened after the match, right, which I'll get into in just a minute, right, I want to firstly talk about specifically the match itself and Butch and Holland losing. It feels like the Brawling Brutes are basically doing nothing on SmackDown, and it's felt that way for quite a while now, since War Games pretty much. Butch has done next to nothing. He's a young star who could be a top competitor in the SmackDown division, in any WWE division. He's one of the best wrestlers on the planet, in my humble opinion. And he's great at he's great at promos. He's got something about him. He plays a phenomenal heel. And yet, they're just not really doing anything with him on the main roster. So, Clark, I'm going to pass this to you first. What do you think the plan is for the Brawling Brutes? Or do you think they don't really have one?
I don't think they have a plan, is the answer. It's sad because they were more successful in my eyes than Damage Control. But it's another situation where, and more logical, it just feels like it's being wasted, and it's probably time to tell the breakup story. Right? Whether it's Butch or Ridge that stick together and turn on Sheamus, or it's Ridge and Sheamus and Butch turns on them himself. Maybe they bring in a fourth. I don't mind if it's Butch and Ridge as a tag team. They still bolster the tag division. I view them as a tag team currently on the main roster. Do I know what Pete Dunne can do as an individual? Of course. And what he's capable of? Like, I've long thought, underutilized. Why'd you give him the goofy name? Totally unfair. And then the dude gets thrown into the group and does the best he absolutely can with it. He's been awesome on NXT in this Heritage Cup tournament so far. And bell to bell, he's as good as anybody. To your point about him being a heel, I agree. Somebody else that's kind of wallowing, moving around, not doing much. Maybe it's Ridge and Sheamus that turn on Butch temporarily. And a certain bro reforms his team temporarily with the Bruiserweight. We get Pete Dunne back. That's how we reintroduce Pete Dunne. Just a short run. Because that match, as a tag match, the Bruiserweights versus Ridge and Sheamus, would be a banger. And it'd be a nice way to close the banger after banger after banger after banger chapter. No matter what you think about Matt Riddle, their tag team was very successful in NXT. And it was fun to watch. And they worked together really well. I understand he's kind of got his thing going with McIntyre. I don't dig it. Doesn't make sense. Maybe he's thrown into the mix somehow. I mean, I don't know. It's not really possible given the rosters. But that would be the way that if I was fantasy booking it, I think that'd be cool to see. Give him Pete Dunne back. Bring back the Bruiserweights just for a second, or the Broserweights. And then have them have like a match or two against Sheamus and Ridge, go their separate ways, go back to being individuals. Maybe Ridge and Sheamus stay together for the time being.
Yeah.
But separate
Butch
from the bunch.
You do have a good point there, Clark, because we never saw the Broserweights, split up. What happened was the pandemic. That's what,
Right.
resulted in them
Yeah.
splitting. I mean, when you started talking there and talking about potentially, kicking out Sheamus and adding in a third man, I thought you were going to steal an article idea of mine for the second time in 1 week, where I said earlier this year that they should bring back Pete Dunne and replace Sheamus with Tyler Bate. And, for them to go on, I said to call them the bloody Broserweights. I'm not sure if, that's possible or not. But I think that could have been, in context, I thought that could have been, it would have made a lot of sense to do, with that. As for the Broserweight, I mean, there's obviously the brand split, right? And the only person who's more adamant about ending the brand split seemingly than WWE is you, Clark, because you pitch about 5 ideas on the show a week where the brand split goes out
I'm
the window.
over it. They don't do it anyway.
It's true. They don't.
They don't do it anyway. So I'm over it. If you're not going to do it, neither am I.
Fair enough. But now let's talk about the team, which I like to call the Street Business, right? The Street Profits and Bobby Lashley. I love these guys. I think they're awesome. But the Judgment, they were celebrating their win, and the Street Business came out. They got in the faces of the Judgment Day, and this visual, wow, oh wow, did it make me want to see this 6-man tag team match. I'm hyped for this possibility of a feud. I'm hyped about the possibility of the Street Profits taking the tag team championships from the Judgment Day. The real question is, though, is this heel versus heel, face versus heel, or what? We don't really know. Is the Street Business a heel or a face yet? I honestly, personally don't mind them starting out, facing heels, because it might make them look like a face even though they're heels. And then as the storyline progresses, we slowly see more and more, oh, wait, no, they are heels. But I know that's something which a lot of people will complain about. But Anthony, give me your thoughts on this one.
I think this is one of those interesting things. Clark and I used to see this back in the Attitude Era. WWE was building like rival gangs, essentially. And I feel like that's very much what you have between the Bloodline, which is the main source mafia, and, they see that falling apart. So now other groups want their territory. And that's kind of what I feel like they're leaning towards. They're leaning into it. Judgment Day implied it. The Street Business, whatever you want to call it, they all seem to be implying that they want the territory that the big boss has because his territory's fallen apart. It's a very much power vacuum. So I think it is completely fine in this scenario for them to 100% do heel versus heel. Whether you want to call them the Wall Street Profits, whatever you want to call them, you could totally do that with Bobby's group. You could do that with Judgment Day. It could be heel versus heel as long as you make the argument they're competing for dominance. They want to be the dominant group in WWE. I think that's the smart play there, personally. I think, that's the smart play. That's the interest. If you could do it well, because they've done the whole Godfather thing with the Bloodline, I think you could totally do that. So I think it's how you book it, but you can make that work. I think this does lead to some type of War Games match. Now, we have seen in the past in NXT, it was smaller numbers, but they've done more than just 2 teams. They did, I believe, 3. Might have been the first one because Roddy Strong was with the AOP. It was the Undisputed Era, and I want to say there was a 3rd team, if I'm not mistaken. There was something to that effect.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I absolutely do. I mean, we'll get a bit more into the possibility of, faction warfare or war games in the next segment because, well, I have an idea about something that they set up last night on SmackDown. But I mean, regardless if you want to call them Street Business, the Wall Street Profits, I think there's a lot of potential for this faction. You said, Anthony, could they fill the shoes which the Bloodline have left, being the big faction in WWE? I think so. I really, really do. I even would say throw Carmelo Hayes in that mix once he's called up and help, progress his character, progress him as,
Trick
a
Williams, too.
name. Pardon?
Add Trick Williams too. Why not?
Why not? I mean, I'd be down for that. I know they
In all
split them up
seriousness,
now, but
yeah, just while we're up, sorry.
Well, Tony D's available as well down there.
But see, I think Tony D's more
I don't see that fits.
Don. He doesn't
Yeah.
fit.
He could fit in with the Wall Street ones.
He could, but I think he'd be too much of a misfit. That'd be too Sami Zayn bloodline.
Yeah, no,
You know what I'm saying?
that's true. Yeah, it kind of would be what's his name, Tony from The Sopranos joining a rival gang to be just a nobody in it. I think that's what it risks feeling. But then again, they don't have a huge faction for Tony in NXT right now either. It's just the tag team. But that's a conversation for another day, perhaps. A conversation for Wrestling Off the Air, which you guys can check out every Tuesday night at 3:15 a.m. in the UK.
7:15 Pacific, 9:15 Central, 10:15 over on the East Coast. Sorry, I've been working on it myself because I missed it last Tuesday. So I just
me and Clark are just
sneak in a rep.
We just understand all the time zones. Now, whenever we hear a number, we think, what's that in Pacific Standard Time?
I've had to explain how they're fighting at noon in Australia so that we can watch it Saturday night in America to like 15 people about the UFC today.
Doesn't that qualify as math, Clark? I thought you don't like math.
No. It's not me doing the math. I've been having other people do it for me, and then I explain it.
You put the same
intern.
personal
I'm like the middleman.
Chaos has, is it?
Yep. We actually share an assistant.
Oh, you guys share them.
Cheaper that way.
Fair enough.
Yep.
But now
50-50.
Let's get into what was the main event of the evening on Friday Night SmackDown, where AJ Styles will take on Jimmy Uso. And backstage before the match, Jimmy Uso was told by Paul Heyman that while he is still in the Bloodline, he now needs to prove himself once again. Heyman then approached Styles a couple of minutes later, and Styles, well, he wasn't too happy to see him. He got in the face of Heyman, started choking him, and then Jimmy Uso took out AJ Styles. But to add another layer to this, Styles later in the night wasn't happy that Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows and Michin didn't come to his aid, didn't come and help him. So AJ Styles took that phone right out of Carl Anderson's hand and smashed it on the floor. I mean, there's cracks in the OC very, very clearly. We got to the actual match. Solo Sikoa allegedly wasn't meant to be in the building. He was there. He came down. He watched Jimmy Uso lose to AJ Styles. A fun main event on Friday Night SmackDown. But here's my theory, right? I've just done a post about it to the Wrestling Republic Instagram page. In fact, go and check that out if you haven't already. But I believe this is all heading to William Regal coming out and saying, War Games, because I think Jimmy Uso will be teaming up with Solo Sikoa. The Judgment Day and Dominic Mysterio, Damon Priest, and Finn Balor of the Judgment Day, who of course helped the Bloodline on SmackDown. They came down and fed AJ Styles to them, going up against AJ Styles, Carl Anderson, and of course, they completely left my head. Now, this is the Wall Street Profits, that's it. Bobby Lashley,
Yes.
The Street Profits, in a 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series match, but in War Games. Because the reason I say Carl Anderson instead of Luke Gallows is because it wasn't Luke Gallows' phone that AJ Styles smashed. It was Carl Anderson's. Carl Anderson, we've seen him go on big singles runs in Japan before. I mean, this guy was a G1 Climax finalist. He is 100% good enough to be a singles competitor. And I think that maybe where they could be heading in this to give him a little bit, of a mid-card singles run. I think that could be a lot of fun indeed. So I think this is leading to Solo Sikoa and Jimmy Uso teaming up with Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and Dirty Dominic Mysterio to face Bobby Lashley, the Street Profits, AJ Styles, and Carl Anderson. War Games Survivor Series. They have quite a few months to build this, but I think they will, and I think that they will do it successfully, and it will be a lot of fun indeed. We got Bobby Batito in the comments saying he liked the match between AJ Styles and Jimmy Uso. Well, I liked it too, but Anthony, what did you think about it? Did you like it, and where do you think this is heading?
Well, the first thing I want to say is you had mentioned the William Regal thing. Technically, I don't think his year's up for he can't appear on camera. Of course, they could always play the old line from recordings, or he could do it backstage and say that he did it from a recording. As far as a War Games match, the OC, in theory, should be one of the stronger groups trying to fill that void of the Bloodline. You would think they would be involved in this gang warfare. I don't exactly understand the logic of bringing up a more established group like that. And I kind of feel like Anderson and Gallows would be together. So they're either both going to leave AJ or they're going to stick with him. I think that's the key for a lot of this. I think they could definitely do a War Games. I don't know whether or not who's going to be in it, whether it's going to be pieces of the Bloodline in it. I don't like the direction they're going with the Jey Uso thing. Now I think they're grasping. They had the hottest storyline in wrestling, and now I think they're grasping at it. Yeah, I think they don't know how to end this thing either. So I think they're stretching it out. Jay's like, I'm out. No, you're not out until we say you're out. Okay, now I'm good. Now he has to prove himself to get back in. Like you're getting a little convoluted now on what you are trying to do here. Is it, he's in, but Roman's got his eye on him because he's waiting for him to turn at any moment? Or is he really proving himself like he's Sammy, who had to prove his loyalty? I don't know where they're going with this. I feel like they're stretching this to try to get this to the ultimate destination, which presumably is WrestleMania with Cody again. I think they're stretching it to try to get there, and it's harder, especially with Roman not there. So you're building it off of Paul Heyman and now Jimmy Uso because Jay is on Raw and Sammy and Kevin are gone. So now you're trying to resuscitate this thing to keep this thing alive till at least Mania when this thing should come to a head. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. You really, really are. It's starting to get repetitive. It's starting to get almost directionless at times. Presumably Jimmy and Jay at Mania, I'm guessing, based off Jay, of course, moving to Raw. That makes sense there. Yeah, to keep them separate for Mania.
Speaking of super kick parties.
Yeah, but I mean, they're in a situation now where ever since the Cody loss at Mania, the Bloodline and Roman Reigns' championship, reign, it's all been within the Bloodline. There's stars such as LA Knight and other stars within the company, AJ Styles even, who Roman Reigns could be feuding with. They could do feuds outside of the Bloodline, and they're just not doing them. I mean, last night we saw Paul Heyman and LA Knight have that little bit of an interaction. Maybe that is where they're leading?
The problem they would have with that is, realistically, almost like Gunther's Intercontinental reign. Yeah. You're like, dude, he's not going to lose it. He's not going to lose it before Mania. So if you put him in there with LA Knight, you're putting him in there to job out. I'd rather let him lose the title. Then, that opens up the door because whoever holds it is not going to have a stranglehold over it like Roman does. Yeah. Like, realistically, even if Cody gets it, he's not holding it for 3 years. Like, that's not happening. So, LA Knight, the door opens further up. There'll probably be another draft probably at some point, so the doors are going to be opened. Listen,
it'll be the next year at this point.
They don't hold them, but let's be real. Like at that point, they're probably going to do another one probably by next summer.
They will, yeah. It'll be next April. I think April, early May.
Right after Mania.
Now, really. Yeah.
I thought you were saying earlier than that.
No. It would be after he loses the title at Mania.
Never mind me. No, you're good.
I mean, that is very true. But here's the thing: you tell a good story, you throw people into you can suspend people's disbelief if you do it well. Of course, as hardcore fans, you probably won't be fully into it, but to the casual audience, who knows? Because there's been multiple people in this championship reign who it's been fairly obvious Roman would lose to, but the crowd has been convinced that he would lose to during some spots. And people are just shocked that he's managed to kick out of the move. The same with Gunther. I mean, you showed that crowd reaction on Monday when Gunther kicked out, when Gable almost won the match. I mean, people really thought for a second, hang on, Gable's winning this thing.
That would have been a mistake not to have Gunther beat the ref.
Oh, it would have been a mistake.
Not to be that guy, but I got to point out, I love that our conversation about AJ Styles, Jimmy Uso turned into a full-blown conversation about a 3-year storyline every single time.
Let's
not forget that this is what happens to us. Like it is everything. And like I love AJ Styles. We're worried about the OC. By the way, we're talking about the Bullet Club. Like they've sold more shirts at Hot Topic than Hot Topic sells anything else. Like, and they're the original club, right? We've got the Diet Bullet Club over in AEW. We've got the Bullet Club Light over here in WWE as the OC. And there's like dissension there, but the conversation still always goes back to the big dude that played D tackle at Georgia Tech, Roman Reigns. Like it doesn't even matter. I mean, like AJ Styles is a no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famer. Yeah. Just had one of his first main event wins on a SmackDown in like a year. And we're talking about Roman Reigns. They're both Georgia guys too. Like you have Tech and a UGA guy. Is the funniest part, not to equate it to American college sports, but it's hysterical to me. Like
I mean, literally the guy that retired the Undertaker.
Yes,
that's I mean, true. This is the man that retired the Undertaker.
He was the next Shawn Michaels. He was the next Shawn Michaels. He was the best wrestler in the world. He did everything everybody ever said. He has a main event match against Jimmy Uso, and we can't not talk about Roman Reigns. That's the craziest thing in all of pro wrestling in my mind. Not to get all like,
oh yeah,
but it just blows me away.
And he's not even there. He's not.
Yeah,
even
exactly.
He's
not even blaming.
He's not even showing up.
Yeah, and I'm not even blaming us or the company. Yeah. No, I just think it's the brilliance of Roman Reigns.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a great point. It really is. But Clark, you said we're not talking about AJ Styles, but give me your thoughts. Do you think this is leading to a War Games?
No, I really don't. I loved the teams that you presented, and I would love that War Games. I don't think Regal can say it, even if it's taped. Someone else is going to have to say it. I do think we're going to get
technically speaking, I think it would just be okay.
It'd be close.
They did it last year, though. Last year, before he jumped, they played the audio.
Yeah, they did play the audio. Who knows? Yeah. Either way, whether Regal says the War Games or not is not the point I'm trying to make here. It's about I do think there will be a War Games match. I don't necessarily think the one that you presented would be that match. Would I be excited about it if that is what's booked? Of course. Yeah, no, that I love the way you laid it out. I personally think that War Games, it's time to have a really, really strong women's War Games.
Oh, yeah.
And to really unite that division, I think that's the direction you have to go. Especially because, as weird as it sounds, we have the faction warfare, but we don't have 5-on-5 factions that actually line up, traditionally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And on the women's side, you can have 2 5-person teams that really elevate everyone in it. And that's the route that I would go for War Games this year, at least personally. But even then, it all goes back to Roman Reigns. If he wants War Games it is. Maybe we'll get Heyman in there. Maybe we'll get Heyman in there as the 5th member of the Bloodline.
I mean, I hate to rain on everybody's parade, but I just looked at the seating chart for a Survivor Series. And I mean, who knows? I'm not a ticket expert, but looking at the seating chart, it looks like a very standard setup. I don't think they can fit 2 rings based on I mean, it's a square ring. The chart is a square ring.
Only one.
Yeah, so
it's
unfortunately, that might
it's the
get
first
the
ever bunk bed.
They stack it? That would be great.
They could do the triple tier. They could triple tier it.
I'd be down for that. I'd love that. I mean, shout out WCW.
Ready to rumble setup.
Yes.
But
Jimmy the King has to be guest like ring announcer or something.
Make it a whole video game maze.
But thank you guys so much for watching. If you're over on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe. If you're on Twitch, a follow would be lovely. And if you're on Spotify audio only, a cheeky 5 stars, well, it would make my day. We'll be back here tomorrow, the same time, for Mailbag Monday, where we will answer your questions, which you can submit via Wrestling Republic's Instagram story. I'll put it up in just a little bit. It's going to be a fun show, but thank you to Clark and Anthony for joining me today. Great episode, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy.